it's planting day. We're gonna be getting all of the seeds in for the entire summer garden today. Okay, maybe not all of them, but the vast majority of them are gonna go in today. We're not gonna do any transplants today. I'm gonna do transplants as a separate video. I just feel like direct sowing kind of needs its own moment. I know it has kind of its own confusions and questions that we can kind of go over. I apologize for my congested voice. I somehow managed to get sick at the very end of April, like not cold and flu season at all, but here we are. And of course, last frost waits for nobody, so we have to get this stuff in the ground. But first, let's head into the greenhouse and we'll pull seeds from my seed binder, figure out what we need to plant today. All right, so this is my favorite time of year because I get to kind of show you my master plan in a way that maybe makes more sense than just like showing you the paper version, right? We're gonna put the paper into real life today. I do want to remind you, this is my full-time job, so you're going to see a version of gardening that is a little bit extra. Especially because of my chronic pain and everything. I try to be super organized so that everything can just fall into place when we hit this busy time of year because there's just so much to do. So take it with a grain of salt, like take what works for you, leave the rest, because I know this is going to seem a little bit hyper extra organized to some people. So here we have the main garden beds. I have 15 garden beds in total. We're not going to be planting all of those today. We're not going to be planting the greenhouse today. So we'll probably have a few separate videos. We'll do a video today for direct sowing in the main beds. We'll do a tea garden planting video, a greenhouse planting video, and we're even going to be planting an entirely new garden, actually building raised beds for my friend Roxanne in New Jersey later on in the month. So it's just all the planting right now. But this bed in particular, this zone I should say, has 6 beds as well as the arch trellises. And just to give you a quick overview reminder, you can go back and watch my full garden planting videos to get the scoop on exactly how I do this. But I list out everything I'm going to be growing in the beds. I assign each item a letter code and then I fill in the boxes. So what I do is kind of a combination of square foot and intensive planting. And that is just what works for me. And I think one of the most beautiful things about having a garden is that you can kind of pick and choose all sorts of different things to make it your own and make it work for you. So we'll talk more about that and like the hierarchy of how I plant things, because it does really dictate not only where things go, but just like how I'm packing things in there. And that'll be easier to demonstrate as we go through planting everything over the next few weeks. But basically right now, I'm just getting all the seeds in the ground. And for these main beds, we need to pull a bunch of stuff from the binder. My seed binder is my favorite way to organize seeds. You can see everything. It's just like organizing your Pokemon cards. So this is just a really beautiful option to keep things organized. Of course, it only works with your standard size seed packets, so I always have a few that don't end up fitting in here. But we're just gonna go through and grab what we need today. So we are gonna be doing a whole bunch of squash, and because the squash are so big, I like to put them in the corners of the bed, the outside corners, so that they can trail down. And we'll talk more about like specifically how to plant things too when we head back out into the garden briefly. But for right now, I just need to pull all my squash for this year. We're doing a bunch of new varieties this year, actually. I'm not doing a lot of the same ones that I had last year. So you have a carnival squash right here from Fedco that we'll be growing. There's 2 packs on either side of these. So I also have a black futsu. And then I grabbed all of these from Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, which I haven't actually grown from them before, but I've heard amazing things. So we're gonna be doing all of these. So we have a Magic Kusha, Seminole, tan cheese, and a spaghetti squash. I actually never thought I liked spaghetti squash, but it turns out I just don't like it prepared like spaghetti, like with red sauce. I've made it with like a spinach artichoke type filling before and it was so good. So we're actually going to be pulling from this side of it as well. So we need the delicata candy stick dessert. We have a acorn winter squash. This is the Rise and Shine hybrid summer squash from Burpee. We're doing a dark starred zucchini. I believe this one is supposed to be better for like preventing squash vine borer. I also have a lemon squash and a tromboncino. I don't know. For watermelon this year, watermelon can go kind of either way for me. I usually have pretty good luck with Sugar Baby. Mountain Sweet is also a good one that I find like has the best flavor in my opinion. But I'm actually not doing either of those in these beds this year. I might throw some down in just in-ground spots if I have room. But I'm going to be trying a new one, Orange Glow Watermelon. So that's gonna be orange inside. These are all my tomatoes, which we already started from seed. We're back to the cucamelons this year. I missed them last year, so we'll be doing some of those. We'll do some slicing cucumbers. This is the DMR 401 hybrid. It's supposed to be a little bit more resistant to some of the issues that I've been having with cucumbers, with like blight and stuff in the past, and cucumber beetle. Last year I did this lemon and suyo. The lemon was super productive. The suyo didn't do so great for me, but usually my go-to is Market More. We're also going to be putting some Malabar spinach on the arches. And these, okay, there's some new ones for me here that we're going to be doing. So I have a purple potted asparagus bean. This is a titberry bean, which I guess is very popular in like indigenous communities, is super heat and drought resistant. And then my favorite just general bush bean is the Gold Rush bush bean. These are yellow. I also usually do a provider bean, but I don't see them here. And I think that's it. I already pulled some from my herbs and flowers binder because there just weren't that many, so I don't want to bring the whole binder out. But we do have some teddy bear dwarf sunflowers, some Alaska variegated nasturtium. I have my Cosmos seashell blend. These don't look real, like they're straight out of a fairy tale. So beautiful. They have like these double petals that kind of form like a pocket, and then just my chamomile. And then I got a little care package from one of you, which I appreciated so much. Thank you, Sandy. And she was actually sending me, I asked for anise hyssop, which I've been having a really hard time finding for the tea garden, and she had some from her own garden. So this is like my favorite thing about being a gardener on the internet and just having like this community vibe where we all just like share and swap. So I'm really excited to get that planted in the tea garden. We won't be planting that one today, but we're definitely going to get that planted when we do the tea garden video. And she also sent me some bonus surprise seeds, which I don't know how she read my mind on this, but she sent me like the mixed orange, yellow, and red cosmos, which I have been wanting to try forever. And it's one of those things where every time I place an order for seeds, the company I'm buying from doesn't have it, so I never just end up getting it. And then she also sent some of this royal ensign, red milkweed. We love milkweed. A lot of mine got mowed down last year. And these dainty little marigolds, aren't they cute? Anyway, I'm super excited to plant these out. I think most of them are gonna go in the in-ground area behind the beds with the arch trellises. That whole area has the asparagus in it, and I've had some issues recently with mugwort popping up there. So I really want to aggressively overseed it with flowers this year and hopefully kind of crowd out that mugwort a bit, because you guys know if it gets hold, I will never get rid of it. And we're really just trying to focus on getting the main beds done today, because a lot of what I have to do when I have like the fatigue and the limited energy is I really need to prioritize. So not only are we creating like a hierarchy of plants in order to determine what should go where, but I'm also trying to keep in mind that I have a hierarchy of my own energy and what I can and cannot accomplish in a day, which is another big reason why we're breaking up the planting into like so many videos, because I just want to make sure I'm giving each section of the garden the attention that it deserves while prioritizing the stuff that really needs to be done most urgently. But I do think that I also have a tendency to blow this out of proportion and think it's going to take like way longer than it actually does, because like looking at this, that's a lot of seeds, and I could easily tell myself it's a lot of work. But planting seeds in general, like once the prep work is done, all I have to do is just stand there and put the seed in the ground. So I did have an interesting comment the other day, somebody asking me how you can tell if something should be direct sown or transplanted out. And I was saying it's really hard to come up with like a hard and fast rule that will tell you point blank like exactly whether or not a plant should be direct sown or transplanted. One, because it depends on your climate, right? Like a lot of things here we end up transplanting instead of direct sowing, whereas if you're in a hot climate, that has a longer growing season, you might not necessarily have to worry as much about that with something like peppers or brassicas. Here it matters a little bit more. I will say you do get a better just sense of it over time as your comfort level grows with planting things. You will just kind of intuitively know what sorts of things do best as transplants versus direct sowing. A big one that's probably the most obvious is most root crops really prefer to be direct sown because the actual part that you eat is underground. If you disturb those roots, oftentimes that can result in really weird looking root crops. This is especially true with carrots. It's not true with onions at all. Onions I transplant into the garden and they're fine. But there's other plants that you might think like, oh, it's not a matter of it having a lot of days to maturity or anything, like why would I need to transplant it or not transplant it? And sometimes it just has to do with individual characteristics of that plant and it being more tender and more delicate. Like a cucumber is really something that I prefer to direct sow, but you will find cucumber starts in the nursery and you might plant them and it will be totally fine. But you might not know whether or not it's totally fine until you're harvesting that cucumber, because what can happen is the root disturbance actually causes the cucumbers to turn more bitter. So the plant will look fine, it will be producing fine, but the actual fruit on it is not fine at all. So these are the kinds of things that over time with experience you'll just get more comfortable with. I love direct sowing because I think it's the easiest way to start a garden. We're not doing all these extra steps beforehand where we have to germinate seeds inside and keep them alive and thriving for many weeks before we even move them out into the garden. Of course, if you're just buying transplants from the store, that is just as easy as direct sowing, as you're just setting and forgetting them. It's no big deal. And I do a combination of all of them. I'm starting all my own tomatoes and basil because I grow a lot of those, but that's about it for what I did for transplants. And my onions, I like to direct sow, and for everything else I will just grab it as starts from the nursery. There's no one right or wrong way to start a garden, and I like to do a combination of all of them. So we'll head out to the garden and I'll show you kind of how I space things out, and then we'll get this stuff planted. So looking at the beds, you're gonna notice that there's already a decent amount of stuff planted in here. So this is because I don't follow that grid plan like to a T every single moment. Like, it's a guideline, and the guideline is focused on my hierarchy of kind of main plants, secondary plants, and accent plants. So the main plants take priority when I'm building out this graph, and then everything else that goes in around it I know has either a really short time in the garden before it would be in the way of the main plants, or really small root system that's never going to compete with those plants. So they can kind of just go in whenever, wherever. The main thing that I keep in mind is that in the center of each of those 12 by 12 squares is my main plant. So if I were going to be planting a tomato in this 12-inch square right here, all around that is just empty space. And yeah, I could just mulch it and it would be fine. And no, I shouldn't plant another tomato right up in its business, because tomatoes are pretty heavy feeders and they have pretty big root systems. But they're not going to compete with something like a marigold, a basil, or a lettuce. And so that's why these beds already have marigolds and lettuce in them. Some of them even have some radishes in here, because these are things that either are going to be out of the garden before they would be in the way of the tomato, or they're actually going to be symbiotic with the tomato and something like that. So we're not planting tomatoes today, but a lot of the stuff that we are planting is kind of what I would classify as a secondary crop, so something that's not the main thing. My main crops are generally like squash, peppers, eggplant, and tomatoes. They take up the most space, they need the most care. Everything else that goes in around it, it's usually much more low maintenance, and it's a little bit more forgiving about where I put it. So just starting with this bed as an example, this is a 2-foot by 8-foot bed. I have this huge perennial chive that comes up and it's in the way every single year, and that's fine. I also put lettuce in the corners here because I know there's nothing else going in that corner, and I could put lettuce in any of these corners because the only things I have going in my corners are squash, and they're going to take a little bit of time, another month or so, before they're really taking up their full square foot of the corner that they want. In the meantime, this is wasted space if I don't have something like a lettuce in here. So having lettuce in here just makes the space use more efficient. You also can't really see very well yet, but all my carrots are coming up in the center of these beds. I planted carrots down the center line of every single one of these raised beds because that again is wasted space. And I know that they'll be fine there once my bigger plants start to fill in. They'll just kind of sit and wait and be ready to harvest. So they were started early enough that they're getting the sun that they need in the time that they need it before the bigger plants start filling in and shading them out. So I break every 8x2 bed up into 16 squares. And those 16 squares are going to dictate a lot of where most of my plants go. They're not going to dictate where the things on the ends go pretty much. But if we use this bamboo stake, you can kind of see that's our center line, right? So we're cutting this bed in half the long way, and then we're cutting it more into eighths the other way. And I can usually just eyeball this at this point. But one thing that I'll do sometimes if I'm really trying to get it right the first time is I'll find the center of the bed and I'll draw a line this way. And then I'll find from here over the center over there. And I'll do that. And all of a sudden I have all my spots marked out for my square foot garden. So this lets me kind of just visually see exactly where everything is going to end up. But because I'm not just doing square foot gardening, I'm doing intensive planting, it never looks like a grid pattern when everything's filled in. It looks just very random and lush, even though there's a block pattern to everything that I'm doing. So I think that's one way that I get my garden to look really, really full with not that much effort. Some people are gonna look at this and they're gonna hate it. You're gonna be screaming in my comments. That is fine. You can just dump your plants in wherever. The main strategy that I'm using here is just telling me like, this bed is for eggplants. These beds are for tomatoes. Those beds back there are for peppers, because those three things really shouldn't be planted in the same bed ideally. After you've kind of followed that one rule for your big main plants, you can just throw things everywhere, and that is totally fine. This again comes back to, this is my job. I like it to be a certain way. It's going to go in the ground and stay there for the next 6 to 8 months. And I just really want it to be exactly how I wanted it to be. But you don't have to be that neurotic, and that's totally fine. So we're gonna plant out this bed first. And looking at our chart, the main crop in this bed will be our peppers this year. So if I'm showing you like, this is the bed that we're working on. Hopefully you can see this. This is the bed that we're working on. The letter B represents all of the peppers going in here. So there's 8 peppers going into each of these 8x2 beds. And that's because I wanted to stagger them so they weren't right up on top of each other. You can plant peppers 12 inches apart. That's fine. I did it last year. They did great. And they'll actually hold each other up that way. But I wanted to experiment with putting smaller stuff in between the peppers and see what happens. Especially because this year I have more room in the greenhouse to put peppers. So it's less important that I maximize this space just with peppers. I want to have variety out here. So since the peppers aren't going in, I just need to know where they are going so that I don't plant in those spots today. So according to this, our first pepper is actually in this spot here, and then right here. So this would be the first workable area, not including the arch behind you, that we'll be planting in. Okay, so since our main crops are transplants, they're gonna take up the majority of the centers of the bed. So today we're mostly gonna be working towards the ends. So we're gonna do the arches today. I'm really excited about this because I've got my slicing cucumbers. We're gonna be trying a new variety this year, as well as my cucamelons. And as a backup, because the last 2 years I've had issues with growing the cucumbers up these and then I have nothing on the arches, we're gonna do a few Malabar spinach on these as well. Malabar spinach is not spinach at all, but it is a really delicious flowering plant you can eat the greens off of. So I'm thinking as long as we do just a couple of those as an insurance policy, there will be something green on the trellises all summer, no matter what happens to the cucumbers this year. So the Malabar spinach goes about 1/4 inch deep, and our cucumbers can usually go about 1/2 inch to 1 inch deep and about 2 inches apart. And I finally got a hori hori. I have never had one, which is just wild to me. But so this is actually the entirety of this space that we have to work in for everything that's growing up on these trellises. But what you can't see here is there is a thyme plant kind of popping up. So it's generally a good idea to just keep your arch plants near the end of where they're going to have to reach up and climb that arch. I did try to plant snap peas here in the spring and none of them came up. I don't know if they rotted or the birds got them. I don't even see evidence of them in the soil here. But I'm still thinking about prioritizing what crop, right? So although I have 12 inches of space to work with here, of course there's a lettuce plant already in this space. I'm more just thinking like, all right, the cucumbers are the priority. They're gonna go closest to the arch trellis. I'm keeping them about 3.5 inches away from the end wall so that the roots don't get too crowded. And then the Malabar spinach I'll put further out because that's kind of, again, just like our backup plant. And I know it's gonna grow really big, really fast, so I'm less worried about it. Now I did soak these last year, and Malabar spinach also germinates better with some scarification. So because I know I'm not doing the best I could for them in these circumstances, even though I want just a couple of plants, I'm going to plant extra seeds. I have extra anyway, and just make sure I'm giving myself that insurance policy in case some don't come up. And then we'll just do a couple in the middle, just again to be on the safe side, but they're further out than our cucumbers are going to be. And we're going to replicate this on the other side, but that may result in us having just way too many of everything, and we will have to thin it, and that is fine. I really should just get my stool. I don't know why I'm not on my stool right now. Got too excited. Okay, these are the DMR 401s. Really optimistic about this. I don't know. I just feel like this is going to finally be my year for cucumbers. I have to check the depth on the cucamelons. Those are called musk melons or sour gherkins. They look like tiny watermelons if you've never seen them before. And they're the size of like a grape, but they taste like a cucumber. Yeah, these are tiny. So generally we want to plant our seeds about twice as deep as they are wide, and the cucamelons are much smaller than our cucumbers. So I'm going to make a new row just outside of it. We don't even need to Google this. We can just go off of instinct, which is telling me the seeds are about 1/8 of an inch, so we're going to go about 1/4 of an inch. And I am overseeding this just because I've had tricky luck with cucumbers and cucamelon germination. I have extra and I just want to be sure. So since I don't want to have to think about this twice by the time I get to the other bed, I'm actually just going to hop over there and plant those ones first. Okay, and then on our end corners in this bed, we're doing the black futsu and the orange glow watermelon. So with most of our squashes, including this futsu, we want to do it about 1 inch deep. You can do these in hills as well, like 4 or 5 seeds per hill, 4 or 5 feet apart, but I'm just doing a single squash, so we don't need to do it that way. And I am putting this in the corner, but the corner is really the center of that 12-inch square. So I still have celery and lettuce and even oregano going on around this. And I am going to put 3 seeds in here just to increase my odds. Especially being in a short growing season and climate, I have to be a little bit more aggressive with overseeding because I really only get one chance to get it right. So if I don't get this to germinate now, it will be too late in the season for me to actually see a productive harvest from the plant before we get our first frost. The orange glow watermelon only goes about 1/2 inch deep. I'll do 3 again. If I were doing that in a hill 4 or 5 feet apart, I wouldn't have to thin them at all. But I am going to thin that down to 1 plant. Working around our chive plant now. And we're going to be doing the dark star zucchini and the lemon squash here. I think it's just called lemon because it's lemon shaped. I'm really hoping I actually get a squash harvest this year. I feel like squash is marketed as this great beginner crop. And if you live somewhere with squash vine borer, that is not true. As soon as they start producing, you get the squash vine borer. Okay, whoa, those are big boys. All right, 1, 2, 3. Cover and pat it firmly. I mean, it is easy to plant. The seeds are so big. A lemon. 3. So this center row is going to be all of our dwarf indeterminate tomatoes this year. I am packing them in pretty tight, so they're going to be every 12 inches for the majority of the bed. But we're breaking it up. We're going to have squash on the end again, and we're going to have in the trellises asparagus beans and the tromboncino squash, because that is one that does pretty well on a trellis. But then other than tomatoes in the center, and our marigolds of course, and our basil, which will go in later, in this bed we're going to have the provider beans, and then in the next bed in the same slots we'll have the gold rush beans. So beans going in the same spots, different beans, different beds. It looks like there's a squash bed coming up from last year that self-seeded itself. Didn't I say I was out of provider beans? Oh, you know what it is? I saved provider beans in my little seed library. That's where they are. I don't know if you remember this from my seed saving video, but we saved provider green beans in my little seed library. So you just have to grab them out of here. All these cool little vials. Let's see if I can show you. Figure out which one's which. Okay, I think I found it. So we got our provider green beans right here. Saved them from our own garden. So we will be applying a square foot gardening concept here. With the trellises, I didn't really need to bother with that so much, and with the squash, it's just like 1 per square foot, right? But with beans, it's actually a lot higher. So we can actually do, I think it's like 9 beans per square foot, which seems like kind of a lot to me, but you know what? That's what they said we can do. We're gonna give it a try. So that's 3 rows of 3, and we want to plant them about 1/2 inch to 1 inch down. I never have issues with germination on beans. Let's see if they come out. All right. These ones I've decided not to overseed them, because if we only end up with 5 in this square foot, that will still be plenty. I'm just not worried about it. Just cover that up. And we'll do one more spot over here. So like right here, right here is a tomato. So this next line, this is our next bean zone. Not being precise here, right? We're using it as a guideline. All right, the corner of this bed is getting tan cheese and Seminole. I honestly don't know how big these are gonna get, but I'm just hoping that they take over the kind of wood chip area to the side of the beds. And these are some more varieties that should be really resistant to the squash vine borer, which was my main concern when I was shopping for seeds this year. It can be a good idea to wait to do your squash till your soil temps are above like 75. It has been unseasonably warm. It seemed like we were never gonna get spring, and we really didn't. It just like went straight from spring into summer overnight, and we've been getting consistently like overnight temps in the 50s and 60s, even though technically like it's just at our last frost date, which is kind of crazy. Okay, so in this bed, we're gonna do the gold rush bean. These produced so well for me all last summer. Provider does too, but these are just a little bit more fun. Oh, I have to do a big harvest. I've got this giant winter spinach, and it lives up to the name. I thought it had bolted, but then I looked it up, and that is just what it looks like. That is a must grow for me next winter again, for sure. Because that is on its way out. As big as it is, it's not really in my way because I know I'm not going to be keeping it here. Oh gosh. So we're doing delicata in this corner. Delicata is a really beautiful squash. And then the opposite corner we'll have our summer squash, which is the Rise and Shine hybrid. Hopeful for this one, but cautiously so. Also, I don't know if you guys have been catching this with my little bucket. I've been putting the things that I'm done with on one side. So I don't have to keep rifling through the same thing to find the stuff I haven't planted yet. So along our trellises where we'll put our asparagus beans as well as the Seminole squash, there is a dandelion here. It's funny with these raised beds, this is my 3rd season using them, and they had such new soil in them for so long, like they didn't have any weeds, they didn't have any earthworms. But that has changed this year. I'm finding a ton of earthworms, which is very exciting, but also some weeds, which is to be expected. It's just the wind doing her job. Asparagus beans, again, I'm not Googling the depth. We're gonna do 2 to 4 times the depth of the seed. You know what? They're just sized like regular green beans, so about a 1/2 inch deep. We're over sowing a bit here. And then this is, I'm only gonna do the Tromachino on one side. So I think it's gonna get really big. They did technically dedicate this whole square foot to Tromachino. And then we'll just do the asparagus beans on the other side again. Oh, the lettuce kind of in the way. These are really long beans, which I've never grown before, but I've always wanted to try. Okay, I think the next bed is gonna be way more interesting, but before I show you, look at this. Oh, isn't it gorgeous? It has so many unopened blooms on it. We're gonna put that in the tea garden. I realize I don't have the nasturtiums like assigned anywhere. This plant is kind of falling apart around me. Okay, because I feel like all we're doing is planting like squash and cucumbers. We did get those asparagus beans in though, that was nice. So this back row, that's gonna be all our eggplant, and it's also going to have more of the same cucumbers, cucamelons. I won't film that, we already filmed that. And then for the squash in that back row, it's just gonna be spaghetti, acorn, carnival, and magic kashaw. But we are gonna put the tepary beans in that row. So I want to show you what those look like, because I've never heard of this or seen these before, and I'm curious how they're gonna do. Like, we're experimenting with this together. So I believe the idea with these is that it's like a black bean replacement, but they kind of look like a lentil crossed with a black bean. Like they're like flat and black. And I don't know if you can eat them fresh or if you only eat them, like if you dry them and then rehydrate them. I get a lot of questions from you guys about like what's good to grow in drought prone climates. I'm not in like a super drought prone climate, but we definitely do have like water advisories and stuff here. So I thought it would be fun to experiment with something that's maybe a little bit more geared towards solving that kind of problem. I'm actually doing big blocks of these because I just really want to give them a good chance to show me if they're going to be a good fit for the garden. Look at this. One snap pea appeared nowhere near the trellis where I planted them. Don't really know what's going on with that. So I don't really have spacing on these, but we're doing like 3 full blocks. So that brings us all the way to here, like all the way to here. This will be our end point. And I'm just gonna plant them like any other bean, I guess, because I don't know otherwise. Like, as much as this is like high stakes for me, I can't replant it, whatever. At the same time, I am sort of trying to practice trusting my instincts that I know what depth to plant these in. Another interesting thing that we'll be planting in this bed is lentils from the grocery store. Because I have some really old ones. And I planted them last year and it was so beautiful. They didn't mature in time for me to get a harvest, but the greenery was really nice to have. Okay, I'm gonna water this bed in and we'll get the chamomile planted in the onion beds. I almost forgot the most interesting thing that's supposed to go in the front beds. I need to grab the peanuts. Doing red Valencia peanuts in those front beds. I just had to Google this because I literally didn't even know if I should take the shell off or not, and the internet kind of was inconclusive. It seemed like the majority said yes, take the shell off, but some seemed to think it didn't matter, so I'm gonna take the shell off because I feel like with it on, it's gonna take way longer to break down and break through the coating. Hey, literally peanuts. This is so weird. Oh, wait. hope I didn't just crush them. Oh. Okay. 2 peanuts. So looks like we could do 5 per square foot for peanuts. So we're gonna go 1 in the middle and then on either corner. All right, I'll put these 2 here. That's going about 1 inch to 1.5 inches deep. And I'm gonna do like 3 blocks of those, I think. Think of a hole in the middle and then all the corners. Oh, it says on this side, remove shell from peanuts before planting. Sometimes you can just read the instructions. That one looks pretty shriveled and not good. Oh, all of these do. Weird. Hopefully the crows aren't watching me right now, or they're just gonna dig these up for themselves. And 1 more block right here. Shriveled ones. I don't know if that means anything or not. Maybe it's fine. I've never done this before. Water everything in thoroughly. Now that we've got seeds in here, we're gonna be watering the surface probably every day until those appear, even though these beds have water underneath. If you haven't grown chamomile yet, this is a really good contender for chaos sowing because it's a wildflower. It self-seeds, and anything that self-seeds means you can surface sow it. So we really don't have to do anything crazy to plant our chamomile. I am going to be putting it in this bed with the wool mulch over it, so we have to make room around the mulch. All the onions are like toward the outsides, and this lettuce will obviously not be here long term, which means the centers of the beds are pretty open. And that's kind of my path of least resistance to getting some chamomile in here. To just part the wool a bit, which I can already see it's holding moisture into the bed so well. I did have some issues right after I put the wool on. It got very windy and a lot of it blew over, but you can see it's already like locking together just from rain and watering. Chamomile takes about 7 to 10 days to germinate. And hopefully once I plant it in this bed, I'll never have to plant it again. There's so many tiny seeds in here. Like that's not even half the pack. So I'm gonna overseed it. And I'm literally just surface sprinkling this. I'm gonna sprinkle it in the corners as well, and just empty spots that I see. And then you can kind of zhuzh it if you want, or just press it down so it doesn't blow away. You really don't need to do a whole lot. This bed full of radishes right now. I really need to harvest them today. It's a good idea if your soil is compacted when you do this to just loosen it a little bit, just so the seed has something to grab onto. Chamomile is kind of a sprawling growth habit. So I'm anticipating, even though I'm putting this in the middle, it'll kind of grow out in between all of the onions and hopefully act as kind of a living mulching combination with the wool. And that's it for direct sowing for today. I feel like I got a lot done. I'm pretty happy about this, but let me know what you're direct sowing in your garden this week. I'll be back soon to show you how we transplant everything into the garden. Make sure you hit like and subscribe so you don't miss that video, and I'll see you next time.